Welcome to IVF This, episode 147, IVF and Healing. Hello, my beautiful friends. I hope you are all doing so well today. I want to take a minute at the top of the episode and remind everyone that I have a free Take Back Your Life call. This is a 50-minute session where you get to decide what we do, right? If you want general questions answered about IVF or coaching, actually getting coached on something that you've been struggling with, or if you'd like more information on what it would be like to work together, you can have all of that information or just some of that information, whatever you want, but it is our time to connect and talk about whatever it is I can help you with. And so to book your Take Back Your Life call, you can either go to my website, www.ivfthiscoaching.com under Work With Me, or on my Instagram or Facebook pages. There's a link in my bio for that call specifically. I also want to take a moment and acknowledge some concerning things that are happening in the US regarding IVF. Now, as this episode comes out a few weeks after the news broke, but as I'm writing this episode, it was in the same week of the Alabama Supreme Court ruling that embryos are now classified as extrauterine children. This has a lot of implications for IVF, and the lawsuit that originated, right, the lawsuit that was the root of this ruling originated in 2020 when three couples lost their embryos that were in storage when an unrelated hospital patient kind of stumbled into the cryo freezer where these embryos were being stored, handled them, and they ended up being destroyed. Now, I think anyone familiar with this case or just hearing about it right now, I am sure that you share in the IVF community's collective outrage that this shouldn't have happened, right? And that this happened and that three families were affected have undoubtedly suffered a great deal of loss as a direct result of the hospital's negligence. Now, I do not get very political on this podcast at all. That's not why you tune in to listen to me. However, I will say that in the US, there has been a great deal of unease in the assistive reproductive technology space since the Dobbs decision came down in May of 2022, which effectively overturned the Roe v. Wade decision. Now, the reason that there were specific fears around IVF when the Dobbs decision came down is because the IVF has never existed until May of 2022 in a post or non-Roe v. Wade world, right? So Roe v. Wade became law in 1973, and the first IVF baby born in the US was in December of 1981, right? So there are just so many unknowns and a lot of fears for US IVF fertility clinics, fertility doctors, and patients since May of 2022. And as a result of Alabama's rulings, at least three clinics have paused, and I'm putting paused in air quotes because if you've gone through IVF, you know there is no pausing if you're in the middle of a cycle or anticipating an upcoming transfer or anything like that. But three clinics have, quote unquote, paused their treatments for fear that their physicians or staff could be held criminally liable should something happen to these embryos, these extrauterine children. And now lawmakers in Alabama and a lot of red state lawmakers, red state politicians have kind of rushed to author bills to protect IVF in Alabama and other red states. But I think it's understandable the fear, especially in the US, around IVFers, and depending on what state you live in, really concerning some of the legislation that has been passed down. So I think that we can all agree that what happened to these three families was unconscionable and that the hospital system in question is responsible, and that the result of this ruling has brought a lot of fears, additional fears, with the people who might be seeking treatments either in Alabama or outside of that. So, as a member of the IVF community within the United States or outside of it, please keep those that are directly affected in Alabama in your thoughts, and by extension, the rest of the US, because this could have national implications. We don't know that yet. We don't know what that's going to look like. And please be compassionate to those that might not currently be affected, but have understandable fears about the future of IVF in the US. So, okay, that's all I'm going to say about it for now. But if you have any questions regarding the situation, or you would like some coaching specific to it, please reach out to me. You can do that via email, hello@ivfthiscoaching.com, or you can book that Take Back Your Life call that I was mentioning before. But I am happy to support you during this pretty uncertain time. All right. Now let's get started on IVF and healing. One thing to note, this episode is going to be pretty list heavy. It's the only way I could combine the 3 topics regarding healing that I wanted to and get through it all in a timely fashion. It's going to be a little bit longer than normal, and I'll try not to make the list super boring, but I want to make sure that we have some good explanations and good examples to fall back on. So don't hate me for all the lists that are coming. Now, healing is a very broad term. I think all of us have talked about healing. It's certainly well within the cultural self-help vernacular lately. But I wanted to be really specific when I talk about healing. And I talk about healing within the context of 3 things: rest, relaxation, and restoration. 3 R's. Okay. So I'm going to talk about what they are. I'm going to talk about what they're not, and why they're important, and some examples for you to incorporate true rest, relaxation, and restoration in your life. And no, I'm not going to take your social media. I'm not going to take your online shopping. I'm not going to take your alcohol. I'm not going to take your comfort foods, anything like that. That is not the point of this episode, to tell you what not to do. So don't shut it off. Hear me out. Listen to what I'm going to try and say, okay? So I think for most of us, rest, relaxation, and restoration kind of feel like a work of fiction, like some ethereal thing that, yeah, sounds good on the surface. But is it really, truly realistic? Or at least that's how it has felt for most of my adult life. And even once I became more acquainted with this idea of them, I still feel like I have a lot to learn. Like, I can sit down and read or relax or whatever, but only after I do XYZ, right? That has been the story of my life. I can only rest, relax, or restore after I've accomplished these things, right? It's usually a laundry list of things that are never truly finished: cleaning, grocery shopping, things like that. Projects for work, they're never truly finished. Like, those things are kind of on a constant rotation on our quote unquote to-do list. And so I have always, and I think most of us are socialized to have this like ultra productivity kind of lens that we see through the world and see our actions through and our worth through. And so, in order to earn the ability to rest, relax, or restore, we have to be super productive to get there. But the problem with that is that we rarely get there. I don't think, and for me, I don't even think I ever really thought about restoration until the last couple of years. So I'm almost 39. For the vast majority of my life, even things like sitting on the couch when maybe there was a counter to wipe down, right? I'm thinking about my adult life. Even when I was a kid, if you had a similar childhood to me, to like on Saturday mornings, we got up and cleaned. And only after we cleaned could we kind of rest or relax. Or then, I played soccer for many, many years growing up. So, then I would run off to soccer. So I was never really felt like I had the opportunity to rest or relax, and certainly not being well acquainted with restoration until just recently. And so I feel like this is probably something that's very common for at least people who are socialized as women to experience, right? And so a lot of people used rest, relaxation, or restoration interchangeably, or at least I did for a very long time, but they're actually quite different. They have different meanings and ways that they can be applied in your life and the purposes that they serve. So here we are with our first list. Let's start with rest, okay? Rest refers to, this is off the Google, so don't hate me because it's super bland. The rest refers to the state of bodily, mental, or emotional inactivity or repose characterized by relaxation, recuperation, and restoration of energy, right? So rest is the thing you have to get in order for relaxation or restoration to occur. Rest can look like a lot of different things, activities, including sleeping, downtime, leisure, taking a break from mental or physical exertion. The primary purpose of rest is to allow the body and mind to recover from things like fatigue, overuse, replenishing your energy levels, and just kind of promoting overall well being. So, sleeping, taking breaks at work, leisure activities, mindfulness is a form of rest or can be, spending quiet time reflecting, all of those are examples of rest, right? But we have to have rest first. I tell my children and I tell myself very often, whenever I'm really struggling with something or whenever I feel super dysregulated, like I'm getting angry really easily, or I'm emotional, like crying at the drop of a hat, or just not feeling myself, one of the first questions I ask myself is, am I tired? Right? Have I been doing something that required a lot of concentration? Did I not sleep well the night before? Because everything is harder when you're tired. Whether you're emotionally tired, you're spiritually tired, you're physically tired, you're mentally tired, everything is harder when you're tired. So, rest is one of the most important things that you can do. And you can't get to relaxation, and true restoration without rest. That's why it's number one. Number two, relaxation. Relaxation refers to a state of reduced tension, stress, or anxiety, which is often achieved through specific techniques or activities aimed at promoting calmness and tranquility. That is not my definition, that is the Google definition. But what that can look like, relaxation techniques like deep breathing exercises, meditation, progressive muscle relaxation, which is a phenomenal tool that I teach a lot of my clients, yoga, massage therapy, more hobbies, leisure activities, things like that, right? That's what relaxation can look like. The purpose of relaxation is to induce a state of physical, mental calmness. You're wanting to kind of reduce or lower your arousal. For a lot of us, we live in this hyper aroused state, right? And that's not even taking into consideration if you maybe have some sort of neurodivergency, right? If you're ADHD on the spectrum, something like that, you are almost always almost always hyper aroused or something like that, right? So the idea is that you're trying to alleviate some of that stress to promote relaxation, okay? So a couple more examples, deep breathing, again, mindfulness, meditation. Sometimes for some people taking a warm bath is relaxing. I know it is for me. Listening to soothing or your favorite type of music, practicing yoga, all of those are relaxation, right? So rest has to come first, then allowing yourself to relax. That can lead to restoration, the third of the three R's. Restoration refers to the process of renewing, replenishing, or revitalizing physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual resources that have been depleted or compromised. Wow. And when I tell you that I never really thought about restoration until the last couple of years, I mean that the idea that those things could be depleted from me, like I felt like I lived in a constant state of depletion, right? That there was ever any idea or hope that I could live a life without that was just, it was so far outside of my conception. It was insane how it never really occurred to me, right? But restoration activities, there's a lot of overlap. You're going to see it involves activities or practices aimed at that recovery or resiliency or just overall well being. Again, getting adequate sleep, practicing self care that's true self care. And I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. I'm not talking about just having a hot bath or 20 minutes to yourself or something like that. That's not true self care. That's the like pseudo psychology industrial complex trying to tell you what self-care is. No. Um, it is seeking support, emotional, whether it's structured support like counseling or coaching, or community support, friendships, relationships, things like that. It also includes participating in activities that promote emotional healing, right? Volunteer work is a form of restoration, or can be a form of restoration, right? As long as you're not using it against yourself, like I have to do this. If you belong to like a church or a spiritual community, uh, volunteering in that can also be a form of restoration. So the purpose, right? The primary purpose of restoration is to repair and rejuvenate and rebuild that aspect of you, or aspects of you, to for general well-being. Like, we're just talking about being a fully fleshed out human who has more to offer to themselves and the world than what they can produce, right? You just being here is enough, and part of you being here, the true you being here, requires rest, relaxation, and restoration. So, some examples for restoration: literally getting enough sleep. Like, I cannot emphasize enough how much things are harder, how things are harder, I guess I should say, when you are tired, when you have not rested, whether that's physically sleeping or just resting your mind, resting your body, resting your spirit, things like that. You can tell there are a lot of similarities in these three concepts, in rest, relaxation, and restoration. But they're all aimed at promoting an overall sense of well-being and giving yourself the space and the permission for your body and your mind to recover. Recover just from being alive in this modern time, with all of the demands that are on your time and your heart and your mind, just giving yourself that opportunity. Right? There's a lot of overlaps between the concepts. There's a lot of overlaps between the activities, right? And that is because restoration, relaxation, and rest, they're intermingled, they're intertwined, right? There are differences. So the focuses are different, right? Rest primarily focuses on physical and mental activities. Relaxation emphasizes like reducing tension and stress through specific techniques or activities, right? Restoration focuses on that aspect of renewing or replenishing depleted resources within yourself. So, in summary, rest, relaxation, and restoration are related but distinctly different concepts that play such an important role in promoting your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well being, because those are all of the aspects of you as a person. You are not just a worker. You're not just an IVF patient. You are not just a partner or a spouse or a child or a sibling, or right. There is so much more to you than just those identities. And that is what rest, relaxation, and restoration are directly aimed towards. Now, I think most of us get this wrong about rest, relaxation, and restoration, is mistaking it for anything that will quiet the constant barrage of trash talk you have with yourself, or numb the pain that you feel. Either one of those. That's not what we're talking about. Before I share this next list, I want to make it abundantly clear that the purpose of this information, the information I'm about to share with you, is for awareness and education purposes. It is not to use it against yourself. When I tell you that I have engaged with almost everything I'm about to list off for you, it is not hyperbole. It is the truth. But we do not have to use it as a way of further inflicting pain and suffering on ourselves. I want you to entertain the idea that if you used any of these things that I'm about to talk about, it was because, one, you didn't know any better. So don't go holding yourself to a standard that you had no clue existed at the time. Or two, it was what you needed to do in that moment when you were just reacting to your situation, your thoughts, your feelings, whatever. When we create awareness around these things, we are giving ourselves the opportunity to respond if something like that comes up again, right? That's all. Please forgive yourself. Please give yourself all of the compassion when you hear this list, okay? Remember the first rule of thought work. We never use thought work against ourselves. Completely defeats the purpose of what we're doing, okay? So, all that groundwork to say, here are some of the ways that we tend to try to turn down the volume on the horrible things that we say to ourselves, or we try to numb the pain, and we mistake that for rest, relaxation, or restoration. Substance abuse or misuse. No one is diagnosing with anyone with anything. No one is pathologizing. Most of us, if not all of us, have probably overused, misused, or abused alcohol, nicotine, THC, or other drugs, caffeine, sugar. Like the possibilities are endless, and that's okay. Okay. Other ways are emotional avoidance. This one is me, and I still work on this daily. But this is when we try to suppress or avoid our emotions rather than addressing them and processing them. Isolation. This is also something that comes very naturally to me. Isolation is really easy, especially when you are going through infertility and IVF and you're kind of exposing yourself to a lot of external critiques, opinions, right? And so it's natural for us to want to isolate ourselves because we think that by doing that, we can limit the amount of opinions or experiences that we have. Seeing babies, happy families, things like that. We don't want to be reminded of those things, so we tend to isolate. Undereating or overeating, right? I can actually vacillate between the two of them. I can be a stress overeater or I can be a stress undereater, just depending on the circumstances. Excessive screen time. And that's whether you're binging on all things offered by all streaming services or doing it on social media, right? You're just trying to distract yourself. Rumination, which is something I've talked a lot about on this podcast. And it's when you just keep going over and over in your mind about something that has either already happened and you can't do anything about it, or a situation that you feel completely helpless about, or future fears, which you also can't do anything about, right? These aren't the only three scenarios, they're just the three most common scenarios that I see in my work. But rumination never allows for a resolution. You are just like a hamster that cannot get off the hamster wheel. And then the last example I'll use is like excessive work or busyness. Anything that will keep you distracted enough where you do not have to address your fears or concerns or emotions. Please remember, this is not an exhaustive list. And two, the dose is the poison, right? Meaning that all of these things that I listed, we do most of these things to varying degrees, but it doesn't automatically mean that you're avoiding your emotions or that you're not engaging in rest, relaxation, or restoration. There we go. But I want you to think about these things in terms of if there is a net negative when you do them or after you do them, then you are probably using them as a way to resist or avoid your emotions. And that's what I want you to be on the lookout for. Okay, so now we know what we're talking about. We have a better sense of how we resist or avoid these things, and how rest, relaxation, and restoration can be very difficult when we avoid these things, if not impossible. So let's break them down into more specific groups, starting with rest. So I think that there's a lot of different types of rest. And so I'm going to go through those different types of rest because I think that by kind of broadening your idea around, for this example, rest, I think it's going to help you maybe target the type of rest you're needing or recognize, hey, that is an aspect of rest I could engage in. Okay. So there's physical rest, right? Literally giving your body a break from physical exertion, sleeping, napping, laying down, anything like that. There is mental rest. This involves giving your brain a break from cognitive tasks and mental stimulation. I get very overstimulated very easily. So I have to take mental rests either throughout the day when I've finished writing a podcast script. I have to take a little bit of a break because I will get so overstimulated that I can't even function, right? I can't do things, or I start reacting really strongly to whatever overstimulation I'm experiencing. Emotional rest, that can look like taking, again, breaks from extremely emotional experiences or stressors. I have intentionally slowed down on my business over the last 4-ish months for that emotional break, right? I love this work and I love what I do, and it can be hard at the same time, right? And so there are times throughout throughout the years, or whenever I feel like I need it, when I have to kind of step back, take on fewer clients, do less work in terms of like content writing or things like that, where I have to take that break for my emotional rest. Social rest, again, taking breaks from social interactions, external stimulus, things like that. Sensory rest. This is reducing your exposure to sensory stimulus, taking a break from electronic devices, going for a walk in nature, protecting your personal time, protecting your personal space, recharging your emotional battery or your social battery, things like that. Creative rest, taking a break from creative endeavors to recharge your creative energy. I did that over the Christmas holiday. I took, I think it was like 4, maybe 6 weeks off, because it was starting to be a real challenge for me coming up with ideas, coming up with content for this podcast. And so that's literally what I did. I took a creative rest so that I could come back more invigorated and more creative for the topics, for the content, for you guys. Spiritual rest, that involves nourishing the soul, connecting with your sense of purpose, your sense of meaning. It doesn't necessarily have to be prayers or meditations. It can be spending time in nature, rituals or practices that align with maybe your spiritual beliefs. Fostering a sense of gratitude is also a form of spiritual rest. Work rest, right? Taking break from work-related tasks to prevent burnout, right? Deciding that you're not going to work past 7 p.m. or that you're not going to do any of your work on weekends, right? Just taking a break to allow your mind and body to recover and rest. Sleep, one of my favorite things in the entire world, allows your body and your mind to rest, recover, and rejuvenate. And then active rest, right? That's the thing. When I was in college and working with my strength coach, playing soccer and stuff like that, we would talk about engaging in low-level activities as a form of active rest, or active recovery, gentle stretching, walking, things like that, right? Low-intensity physical activity that will allow for some rest, but you're not going balls to the wall for everything. All right, that's rest. Now let's talk about restoration, which I think has like 2 or 3 really big headings and then things that fall under that. So physical restoration, sleep, nutrition, hydration, physical therapy, right? Whether that's exercising or actual physical therapy treatments, right? There's mental restoration. So mindfulness practices, cognitive behavioral therapy, or my personal favorite and the one that I utilize the most often, acceptance and commitment therapy. Cognitive rest that we talked about earlier, learning or intellectual stimulation is also a form of restoration. There's emotional restoration, therapy, counseling, self-compassion practices, compassion, compassion, compassion. One of the greatest forms of personal restoration that you can give to yourself. You doesn't require anything from anybody else. Just showing yourself compassion, literally in any of the moments of your life, in any area of your life, is a form of restoration. Journaling, creative expression, painting, writing. For me, writing is a form of restoration. Things like that, right? There's social restoration, social supports, family, friends, community involvement. That's that volunteer. Maybe you're part of a club or a group, something like that. Boundary setting is a form of social restoration, right? Setting healthy boundaries in any and all of your relationships helps protect your personal well-being. Spiritual restoration, meditation, prayer, spiritual practices, gratitude, things like that. Nature connection. I know I've said this a couple of times now. Going out in a walk or a hike in nature where it is appropriate and where it is safe for you can be one of the most restorative, relaxing, and restful times that you can experience. There is nothing quite like being out in nature that it truly is healing for the soul. It truly is. And then gratitude practices I mentioned earlier. Environmental restoration. I engage in environmental restoration pretty much now that I know what it is, I should say. Now that I'm more familiar with it, I engage in environmental restoration on a pretty much daily basis. Decluttering is a form of environmental restoration, right? The more cluttered your area is, the more cluttered your brain is going to be. There is a somatic attunement for your immediate environment and how you feel and how you think and what's going on inside your body, right? There is a lot of overlap in that area. Creating, right? So decluttering would be one form, and then creating a restorative environment, right? Designing your home or workspace that is more conducive to relaxation and well-being. Natural light, comfortable furniture, soothing colors, all of those support environmental restoration. I remember one of my first social work jobs was at an outpatient cancer center. And my office was kind of located just off of the lobby. So I saw a lot of people coming in. I saw a lot of emotion. And one of the things that I added, it was just a simple addition, was a tiny little water fountain. So I could hear just that running water. Um, it was also kind of relaxing for patients who wanted to come into my office, just to either catch up or to talk or for resources, whatever that was. But just having that little piece of nature in my environment was very soothing for me. And then occupational restoration, work-life balance. I know that sounds like such a misnomer, and really work-life balance is going to look very different for different people. Setting realistic goals is a form of that, right? Achievable goals based on your priorities or your values can be a form of occupational restoration. Engaging in meaningful work. Probably one of the most important aspects of occupational restoration is finding meaning in your work, right? And that meaning is going to look very different for everybody. For me, being of service has always been a form of restoration. I like being of service. Not everyone does, and that's not a problem, right? You don't have to be like this truly wholly altruistic person. I'm not altruistic in nature. I mean, I am to some degree, but I have services that people pay me for, right? That's not true altruism, right? But that meaning, that servitude for me is very important, right? When I find myself that I'm getting really tied up in either my social media or, an upcoming launch or something like that, and maybe I'm not seeing as many clients, I actually feel a lot of not great feelings. I don't feel connected when I'm not talking with my clients, when I'm not helping or being of service. So that's really important for me. And finally, relaxation. That can take many forms, but we're going to talk about a few different ones, right? Progressive muscle relaxation. This is one of my favorites, and I did it for a long time without knowing that that's what it was. And I teach it to a lot of my clients, but it involves tensing and then relaxing different muscle groups in kind of a systemic fashion to release physical tension. It promotes relaxation. I know that progressive muscle relaxation, the idea of like tensing yourself to create more relaxation doesn't sound relaxing. How many times can Emily say relaxation in one sentence? The count is 50 currently, but it is actually a very well researched area of relaxation. And you can literally just do a YouTube search for progressive muscle relaxation, Pinterest, Google search, anything, and you can find articles. It's very easy to do. It's a very low lift, just doing it, but it can help with muscle relaxation. Breathing techniques. I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast before, but breathing is the number one way to remind your body that you're safe. right? So think about when you're in a situation or you've had a thought and there's a lot of anxiety that's building, your breath will get shallower and faster. That is everything that your brain is doing, everything it's supposed to do when it thinks that there is an incoming threat, even when you're just like lying in bed at 3 o'clock in the morning and there's really no external threat to you. But breathing deeply, right? Taking slow, measured box breathing steps will signal to your brain, oh, we're okay. We're safe. Nothing has actually happened. I'm not in danger is one of the fastest ways to re-regulate yourself. So box breathing in its simplest form is like a four-sided box, right? You're going to take an inhale for a count of 5, hold for a count of 5, exhale for a count of 5, hold for a count of 5, and then you repeat the process. That is what box breathing is. Mindfulness techniques, a form of relaxation. Again, journaling, meditation, thought work, things like that. That is going to reduce stress, anxiety, and promote relaxation. Body scan meditations, whether you do this for yourself or you can look on YouTube for body scan meditations. But that basically looks like you're starting from the top of your head and going all the way to your toes. And you're just scanning throughout your body. What are you feeling and where are you feeling it? That allows you to get into your body. Number one, that's one of the most important aspects of mindfulness is being in your body, present in your body. And it's a really great check-in, just in general. Visualizations, guided imagery, creative visualizations, all of those things evoke relaxation and reduce stress. Yoga and Tai Chi. I actually took Tai Chi in college. It was one of my physical education credit requirements. It was fantastic. I don't remember a whole lot of it because it was a lot longer ago than I'm willing to admit in this current moment. Um, but it's actually a really gentle, non-contact, non-impact way of doing something and relaxing at the same time. That's one of the reasons I loved it. Aromatherapy, essential oils, lavender, chamomile, those can all promote relaxation. Hot baths or saunas. I love a good hot bath, especially after a long run. It helps my muscles kind of recover and relax. I'm not the biggest fan of saunas. I just don't like to be hot. And I already live in Austin, Texas, where it is like hell's front porch, half of the year. But saunas promote relaxation, they improve circulation, they alleviate muscle tension, all of that. They're really wonderful things. Music therapy, listening to relaxing music, calming sounds, classical, nature sounds, all of that can promote relaxation, reduce stress. And then hobbies and leisure activities. One of my very good friends, she's fantastic with plants, right? I'm like kind of a hospice for plants. Plants come to me when it's time for them to exit living. But she has a green thumb. She's a beautiful garden. She's a beautiful plant, like in-home garden and in her yard. And she finds a great deal. She finds actually when she is working with her plants, she finds that to be restful, relaxing, and restorative all in one, right? And so those type of hobbies, for me, like I said, writing is something that I find most of the time to be restful, relaxing, and restorative. And I'm sure that you have aspects of your hobbies or leisure activities that you love or enjoy that can meet all three of those requirements. Now, I think I mentioned at the top of this episode, it bears repeating, right? That the idea behind this lengthy and list heavy episode is because many of us, most of us, probably all of us, have walked around while we're struggling or when we think things are pretty calm, we've walked around thinking like, I need something. I know I need something, but I'm just not sure what it is. Chances are really high that you need one or more of the things that I have listed. And so getting super specific around those different areas, my hope is that it will provide you with the language to ask for demand of yourself or your circumstance, your situation, that which you need, right? To give you the language to understand how to take care of yourself just a little bit better, with a little bit more compassion and a little bit more tenderness, because that is the best way to take care of yourself while you're going through infertility or IVF. And that is what I hope each and every one of you find. And that is what I have for you today. And I hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of IVF This. If you like what you've heard, click subscribe and follow to make sure you don't miss an episode. And if you want to learn more, head over to www.ivfthiscoaching.com to learn how to work together.